Texas unravels UCLA and hands them the first loss of the season.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Clea Butler. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones. Game Time. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, there were some solid games today as we are all preparing to stuff our face with food tomorrow. We're going to go over Maryland and Kentucky. South Carolina played as well. Always a big game going up against Duke, the opposing state. However, a really interesting battle between Texas and UCLA. The Longhorns handed UCLA, the Bruins, their first loss of the season in a 76-65 victory. Now, a lot of this was because of Texas's defense, Sophia.
That is exactly how they started the game and ended the game, with just putting tons of pressure on UCLA. UCLA had 7 turnovers in that first quarter, and that really helped Texas jump out to an early lead. Towards the end of the first half and the beginning of the second, it really looked like they were just going to run away with this game. Their largest lead was 23, but with that defense, we all know that UCLA runs their offense through Lauren Betts. So they really pressured and were physical with the offensive opponents on the perimeter to not allow for many drives or post entries, which really created a lot of stagnation in the Bruins offense. They also pressed up a lot, providing full court pressure, denied a couple inbounds. Even just that simple fact gives UCLA less time once they're in the half court to actually run through their set. So we saw a couple late shot clock heaves by them, and there was extremely heavy weak side help when they were defending Lauren Betts. They would have a 3-quarter or sometimes even topside seal on her as she was trying to post up right around the rim and get the ball where she usually does. But usually to counter that, the offensive player will do the lob, but they're just sending help on that backside. So Lauren is immediately met with a double right then and there on the catch. Texas executed their defense so well. And in their offense, the best way I can describe the Longhorns offense is that there's no wasted movement. They don't shoot a lot of threes. They were pretty efficient today, but they're not high volume at all. Everything is kind of ran inside the 3-point line. They thrive on looks at the rim and in the mid-range, especially when you have a mid-range assassin like Madison Booker, of course. So they just execute so efficiently, and that physicality really helps when they're setting so many screens. Just caught UCLA on a lot of miscommunications, and as the play was developing and progressing, all of a sudden a player was just wide open for a shot. And that's essentially what led Texas to get on a roll. But it definitely started with their defense.
Absolutely. And you're speaking about the offense now. Let's talk about some of the standout performances for Texas as well. Rori Harmon coming in, dropping 26 points, dished out 5 assists, and was just overall a really defensive force. What impressed me most about her is that she's clearly playing both sides of the ball. Not only was she getting it done efficiently on the offensive side, but defensively, she was drawing fouls, or offensively and defensively, she was drawing fouls, only committed 1 turnover the entire game. But also you're talking about that perimeter defense that Texas had. She was playing a very big part of that, as well as clearly just holding Lauren Betts to only 8 points. I mean, as a force for Texas in general, and her being at the forefront of really leading the defense in this game.
She put on a 2-way point guard masterclass this past game. I was so impressed. We'll start on the defensive end of the ball because that was where her impact was especially felt on the floor today. Every single step or dribble that the point guards for UCLA, whether it was Charlize Ledger-Walker or Kiki Rice, Rori Harmon was in their face like acne. She was just there with them, sliding her feet every step, drew, I think, about 3 charges in the first quarter, just really being tenacious. And that's where your defense starts. And with her providing so much pressure, it really clouds those point guards' vision to get into any actions or make that lob pass over to Lauren Betts. But she's normally a pass first point guard as well. So seeing her have this scoring performance as well is just so much credit to how far she's come. That 26 points, extremely efficient. She was at 9 of 15 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3-point range. So she doesn't take, again, the whole theme of Texas. They don't take a lot of threes, but second guess yourself if you're going to leave them wide open because they are efficient. They as a team shot 40%. She was 6 of 6 from free throws, really helped to ice the game down the stretch for the Longhorns. Those 5 assists, again, so huge, but she was the head of the snake for Texas. So I was really impressed with her performance today.
Madison Booker also adding in 16 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Jordan Lee, 13 points, and Justice Carlton contributing 10 points. So right there, you already have 4 players in double-digit scoring, showing just the balanced attack that you're talking about for Texas. Not necessarily going to be shooting the lights out from 3, but they're doing it all very efficiently and getting a high percentage of shots up. So really impressive from Texas. For UCLA, a couple of standouts too. Gianna Neepkins and Kiki Rice both had 17 points. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but something really interesting today, and credit to Texas and their defense, Lauren Betts, who is, as we've mentioned, the key to UCLA's offense. The offense has typically run through her, as we have seen, was limited to 8 points and just 7 rebounds as well.
8 points on only 8 field goal attempts. So she wasn't even getting looks at the rim. Texas just did a really great job. Like I said, it wasn't just defending her, but defending the whole team in those actions. But UCLA, they really struggled to get her quality touches. The Bruins did make a very valiant run in towards the end of the fourth quarter. They had a 20-point run, something to that degree. And they got it to within single digits to the point where you thought maybe they could pull it off, but they didn't quite. But during that stretch, the key was they started to bring Lauren Betts out of the paint a little bit more, get her looks at the elbow or have her setting that high on ball screen just to allow for a little bit more driving space. I think when they use her as a screener, it allows either that guard coming off to create more or Lauren Betts to get her on the roll. So you are just operating in a little bit more space. They got to the free throw line more in the second half, and they got themselves back into the game overall with, again, their defense. They flipped the game on its head when and applied full court pressure against Texas, caused a couple turnovers, getting those stops, and then pushing with pace. So they still showed some good things. That just initial shock in how fast Texas jumped out at them was, I don't think, anything they've seen this season, and something that they're going to have to get used to if they want to make a far run this year.
Exactly. For UCLA, this loss ends their run for the title in the tournament that they are playing in right now, but obviously doesn't erase a strong start to that they have had for the season, 6-1 now. But for Texas, this means they improve to 6-0, and this is a really big resume boosting win over a top-ranked Power 4 opponent. It's an impressive win for Texas, obviously ranked right next to each other with UCLA at number 3 and number 4. But now they'll be able to go on and advance and play against South Carolina in this championship game, who will get into that South Carolina and Duke game after this. But this was a big win for Texas, and just sitting at that number 4 spot right now. We never know what these AP polls are going to look like after beating UCLA.
Yeah, huge win for Texas. They hadn't really faced any extremely tough opponents up until UCLA, but they were really handling business against those teams. So it's good to see that just carry over onto them. You talk about that matchup with South Carolina. We'll get into that a little bit, but they lost to South Carolina last year in the Final Four. It's going to be interesting, and because right now they're looking pretty strong to make another deep push in the NCAA tournament. But when you're looking at UCLA in that big picture, they still have to develop better offensive synthesis. I think that the return of Sienna Betts, Lauren Betts' sister, and Tamaya Gardner will definitely help with that, get them back into the flow and rotation of everything. But also of note, Cheryl Reeve, the Minnesota Lynx head coach, and Sparks assistant coach Danielle Robinson were in attendance, which we all know in that tournament in Las Vegas that it also includes a game that we'll get into next. The couple players had the opportunity to get scouted in person, so I that's an extra added level of pressure.
Super exciting when we're thinking of, Lauren Betts, who just didn't have a wonderful game today, but she has been considered in the mock draft as the number 1 overall pick. Right now it's Addi Fudd. However, something of note, obviously, as we are approaching that's not a word, approaching the draft coming up after this season. But coming up after this ad read, we will be getting into the South Carolina and Duke game. And it may have been what we anticipated, but giving our credit to Duke as well. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in. The app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Plus, I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Well, it was a matchup between South Carolina and North Carolina when we're talking about the states. South Carolina overpowers Duke 83-66. South Carolina looking to be a little bit more comfortable in their offensive rhythm. We've seen what their defense has been capable of. Dawn Staley cleaned that up real quick after those first few games. Sophia, what did you see from the Gamecocks today?
Offensively, they absolutely dominated the paint. A lot of that had to do with their front court between Joyce Edwards and Madina Okot, but just that points in the paint was a huge reason why they won this game. They outscored Duke 58 to 28 in points in the paint. So just owning the interior there. They were actually only 1 of 10 from three-pointers, but when you can get consistent twos, I think that Dawn Staley will take that. But they just really were aggressive inside. They forced the issue. I talk about those 2 front court players for South Carolina. Madina Okot, she finished with 23 points and 13 rebounds. This is her 3rd double-double in a row, so really on a hot streak. She was 11 of 18 from the field, so extremely efficient. And then Joyce Edwards, she's always going to be there for South Carolina. She poured in 22 points, 9 of 18 at field goals. So some really efficient scoring down low. And I think that is really where South Carolina was able to establish themselves and take control of the game. But when they were starting to play faster is another way I think that their game just started to open up as well. Some of those points in the paint, of course, come from transition layups. So they were just speeding up their offense, make or miss, trying to get it out and run. They got a lot of those looks in transition, and the front court they got so many of those points in the paint using their strength. A lot of offensive rebounds contributing to that. They're just following their own shots. So you always appreciate that extra effort defensively, because we always got to talk about South Carolina's defense. They blew up so many of Duke's actions, and it never really felt like Duke got the looks that they necessarily wanted all the time.
I mean, Duke has struggled in the past a little bit with some of their offense, especially at the beginning of this season, when there's a bunch of fresh faces, some leadership roles that needed to be filled. Kara Lawson said early in the season that it seems like they're still kind of trying to find what their identity is. Duke is another team that you look to when speaking of defense. I feel like a lot of their offense sparks from their defensive stops. It's really hard to stop a South Carolina team who has Joyce Edwards and Madina Okot, who are putting up 40-plus point performances combined. But for South Carolina, too, Tanaya Latson came in and added 12 points, as well as Raven Johnson chipped in 10 points. So you have some guard play for them. On the Duke side, Toby Fournier had 16 points, while Riley Nelson scored 14. Ashlyn Jackson added 11. But it seemed like Duke struggled to keep up offensively for a full 4 quarters.
That's exactly what it was. It's interesting because a lot of the games today followed a theme of one team looking like they're about to run away with it, and then another team that gets it back in close. And so in this game, Duke, they did make a little bit of a run after being down by 20 at one point. 20 was South Carolina's largest lead, and they got it down into single digits. But anytime it felt like they had some momentum to really shrink that gap, South Carolina just responded. So, but Duke, their half court defense, it did help. It did slow down South Carolina. That's why I say when South Carolina started to get out and run is when things really opened up for them. Duke didn't allow as many opportunities for themselves, though, to get into that when they're on these offensive droughts, missed shots and turnovers that just puts them on their heels and having to match up on the fly. But again, like you mentioned, the offense, it was difficult for them to get any easy looks for themselves. One thing that always seems to be reliable for them is Toby Fournier post ups. I mean, just if you can get her on the block, go ahead. If you can get her on the elbow with some kind of rip through drive, she has the athleticism to finish. So that is a pretty consistent portion to Duke's game, but it doesn't seem like they have many other consistent options. And South Carolina just thrived on stopping them every single time.
Yeah, big picture wise, South Carolina will advance to the championship game of the Players Era Championship that they are playing in Vegas right now. And they are going to be taking on Texas, which is going to be a really exciting game to watch. But even the Duke UCLA game that's going to be fighting for third place at this tournament, that's also a really big matchup. Going to be another significant test for Duke, who is still trying to find their rhythm. UCLA obviously going to want to leave this tournament with a win. But for South Carolina and this Texas game, what are you most excited to see from both these units, Sophia?
I could anticipate this being a low scoring game. Just right off the top, I think it might be a little bit low scoring just because both teams pride themselves so much on the defensive end. It's going to be pretty physical. The trend so far for both the squads this season has been to score inside as opposed to along the 3-point line. We might see some free throws in there, but it'll be interesting because some of these South Carolina players got maybe a little bit more rest than the Texas players did. Rori Harmon, for example, she played 40 minutes, but when you look at South Carolina and who their player that played the most minutes, it was Joyce Edwards at 32 because they were a little bit more comfortable against Duke. They're a little bit deeper, and Texas was also short on numbers with a couple of injuries. So I wonder if South Carolina might have the fresher legs, which that's always an important factor when you're looking at some of these back-to-backs, which we don't really see that often in college unless they are in these tournament formats. But I think it's a great opportunity for players like especially in that forward range, that matchup between Madison Booker and Joyce Edwards. I think right there could be a glimpse of SEC Player of the Year.
I think that is a very strong and bold statement, but also a very accurate one. Coming up after this, we're going to talk about a battle between the Big Ten and the SEC.
When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands, using a science backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. Hydration has become a non negotiable for me. Drip Drop helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly, just better overall. And especially if you're someone like me that drinks a ton of water, sometimes you need those extra electrolytes to add into your water to get the full benefits of hydration. So, right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNBA for 20% off.
Another fun matchup today between Maryland and Kentucky. Maryland walks away with this one 74-66. I say this is a battle between Big Ten, SEC. Kentucky is always a team that whenever DePaul would go play was always super exciting to watch. Maryland, I don't know if anybody remembers when Shimmy was on our podcast. She said that Maryland was going to be a team to watch out for, and I think she was right. Kaylene Smikle led Maryland with a season high 22 points, including 9 from simply free throws. So she was able to get herself to the line quite often in this game. Yarden Garzon had a strong first half as well, especially from beyond the arc. She had 17 points. What stood out to you about Maryland's performance today, Sophia?
Their defense, again, is what really helped us set the tone for them the whole game. I call back the pattern of the matchups that we've seen today. Well, Maryland got out to a 20-point lead at one time. Kentucky did cut it back to that single digits, but then Maryland took control in the last couple of minutes after Kentucky tried to play the free throw game a little bit. But they really limited the Wildcats' looks with their three-quarter court press. It forced a lot of turnovers and poor shot attempts late shot clock, using a lot of length at the top and they're just athleticism to fly around, try to deflect the ball. But Kentucky really struggled with that at the beginning. And I'll also throw in, I've been impressed by freshman Addi Mack. So far this whole season, she has really come in, at first was coming off the bench and really provided a great spark for Maryland. She started this game, played 40 minutes, but she finished with 15 points, 6 rebounds. So she had 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. So a pretty balanced game. She's their point guard, and she played with a lot of composure, which I think helped to set the tone for that Maryland offense as well. That shot 9 of 24, which is 38% from three-pointer. So pretty solid. They actually shot better from 3 than they did 2, 3 percentage points better. But I think she really helped to set the tone, like I said, for them offensively, just being that floor general.
Maryland also able to get to the free throw line quite a bit today. So it was basically free throws and threes for Maryland that kind of summed up the offensive production that they had. What's your breakdown of that, Sophia? What did you see from that in particular?
A lot of those free throws were from the end when Kentucky was playing that free throw game, but it is just important to hit those and ice the game as it is at any point. But Maryland, with a lot of that defense, because they were getting so many live ball turnovers at the beginning of the game, especially, they forced 20 Kentucky turnovers on the whole game. But they're getting a lot of those in the backcourt. So then there's not even many defenders back to contest the shot on the other end. So they just really thrived playing in pace and space. Kentucky coming back on their heels a lot on the defensive end.
Maryland, also a team that has been able to crack the top 10 when it comes to the rankings, number 16 for Kentucky. But Maryland handed Kentucky their first loss of the season. What statement does that make about this Maryland team that can maybe fly a little bit under the radar?
Well, exactly what you said. A lot of teams sometimes like being the underdog in a scenario like that because they can surprise some of these other schools. But at that number 7, they're a very low profile, out in my opinion, team that's in that top 10. But with this win, I think they definitely proved that they deserve to be there. It was definitely their best win of the season. And right now, no team in the Big Ten is unbeatable. We just saw UCLA lose. We've seen Michigan lose. We saw USC lose. Those are some of the more heavy hitting team. You have a sneaky Iowa in there as well. But right now, with Maryland's momentum that they've been able to get so far early this season, and then having this signature win, I think it really helps to give them confidence in what they'll be able to expect come conference play.
You bring up such a good point with that too, where essentially all these heavy hitters within the Big Ten that we have talked about have also faced losses before even getting to Big Ten play. So I will say Big Ten is probably one of the conferences I'm most excited to see outside of typical SEC play. I think it's going to be a real battle between all of these teams in every single matchup, considering everyone is beatable, but everyone is also really good at the end of the day. So I can't wait until we get into that. On the opposite side, big picture for Kentucky. Kentucky still looked pretty strong overall. I think this is a loss that they'll just kind of need to regroup after. They at the start of the game, Maryland was able to outpace them pretty early, especially working on turnovers and just consistency through the duration of the game. But I think this is definitely a loss that they can still bounce back from.
Definitely. And they made that push late in the game, got it to single digits. And when they actually got into their half court offense and settled down the pace, you could tell that they had a really solid group of talented players that have a great ability to just hit shots whenever the team needs that. So saw that today, but they beat Louisville last game. And so I think that today it was a good matchup competition wise to prepare them for what they'll face in the SEC, which is probably the deepest conference in the country, but they definitely possess the athleticism and strength to compete against some of those other teams. And I would also add that this game was it was a holiday game and it was in Puerto Rico. Some of these tournaments that are in tropical destinations, am I sometimes take with a little bit of a grain of salt. Having done a tournament once in Hawaii myself, it can be a little easy to want to spend extra time on the beach, getting some sun, getting your tan on, especially if you're coming from a place like maybe Kentucky or Maryland, with I don't know what the weather's like right now, but I bet it's not Puerto Rico. So again, that just goes to my point. I think that this shows a lot for both teams and still provides a good litmus test and just showcase of what they can do. But take this one with a little grain of salt because it can be a little easy to get some of those island vibes in you.
Listen, I went to Puerto Rico for my birthday, and trust me, all I was thinking about was empanadas and everything of the sort. So I couldn't imagine, being there at this moment when it is freezing and being able to enjoy an island like that. But even when traveling with the DePaul team, Doug Bruno had a strict no beach policy while they had the games when we were in the Virgin Islands. They could only go to the beach once the games were all over. So the sun really does drain you. But But I think, again, a game that Kentucky can bounce back from. Don't hold them to this one too bad. But we'll get into those exciting matchups tomorrow. Going to be more top 10 teams going up against each other. But that'll do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy early Thanksgiving to those that will celebrate tomorrow. And we